Good evening and welcome to the ordinary meeting of Ararat Rural City Council on Tuesday the 18th of February 2020. Council's keen to engage with live members of the community and live streams the formal council meetings to make them accessible. The stream will be available to view on Ararat Rural City Council's Facebook page from 6 p.m. and on Council's website www.ararat.vic.gov.au from Wednesday morning following the council meeting. You do not require a Facebook account to watch the live broadcast. Simply enter www.facebook.com/Ararat Rural City Council into your address bar. Councillors, I invite you to stand for the traditional acknowledgement, opening prayer and Councillors' pledge. Firstly, Councillor Deutsch, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Councillor Hull. No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Beals, I beg your pardon.
Almighty God, we humbly ask you help us as elected councillors of the Ararat Rural City Council, guide our deliberations, prosper what is your will for us, to your honour and glory, and for the welfare and benefit of the people whom we serve in the Ararat Rural City.
Thank you.
We will undertake the duties of the Office of Councillor in the best interests of the people of the municipal district of the Ararat Rural City Council and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us under the Local Government Act 1989 or any other act to the best of our skill and judgment.
Thank you. Please take your seats. Item 1.3 of our agenda is apologies, and we have a motion that the apology of Councillor David Petman be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Hull. Seconded, Councillor Beals. Those in favour? Carried. Confirmation of minutes. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of December 2019 be confirmed. Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, for moving that motion and Councillor Deutsch for seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Item 1.5, the declaration of disclosure of interests. Any disclosures are to be made immediately prior to any relevant item being discussed. Councillors, do we have any disclosures for this evening's agenda? There being none, we'll move on to item 1.6, the admission of urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business any councillor may wish to bring forward to the agenda? We have none. Recommendation is not required then. We have an unusual item on our agenda for this part of the meeting. Item 1.7, condolences. The Ararat Rural City Council, myself, fellow councillors and staff extend our condolences to the family of Mr Peter Carthew OAN, former councillor of the City of Ararat and former Chief Commissioner of the Ararat Rural City Council. We wish to conduct a minute's silence to pay respect for the passing of Mr Carthew. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Section 2 of our meeting addresses public participation, and the first item is the request to address council. Mr CEO, we have no request to address council at tonight's meeting. 2.2, deputations and presentations. We have none scheduled. Thank you, Mr CEO. Item 2.3, petitions.
We've received 2 petitions, Madam Mayor. The first of them is for the sealing of Truscott Street, signed by a number of residents of Truscott Street, and their issues there are high traffic volume travelling along towards businesses and school buses using that as well. In addition to that, it's road safety concerns and also dust concerns as well on that section of road. So the petitions come forward from residents of Truscott Street, and as required, we'll ask that petition to lay on the table for consideration at the 17th of March meeting of Council.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. And we have a local law that states, as you have mentioned, that that petition will stay on the table, and no motion is received to deal with that unless we agree to at some other date. So that being said, the recommendation is that the petition requesting Council to seal Truscott Street Ararat be received and lay on the table for consideration. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Beale. Seconded, Councillor Braithwaite. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. A second petition, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a second petition also relating to sealing of a road within a municipality. That's the sealing of Ironbark Lane in Ararat. And again, that's signed by citizens and also the people out of town on that one. They wanted for flood prevention purposes, but also to damp dust as well. So, again, we'll ask that to lay on the table until the 17th of March so we can bring back a report on that item.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So similarly, the recommendation is that the petition is received and lay on the table for consideration. Thank you, Councillor Beale. Seconder, Councillor Deutsch. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Section 3. Reports requiring council decision. The first item is delegations from council to the Chief Executive Officer. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll pass this to Ms. Woolcock to talk about first. Woolcock. I'll get the name right eventually. I'm working with you for a year and a half.
Thank you. Council's delegations and authorisations reviewed at least twice a year, with the current review incorporating updates for staff delegations and legislative changes. Item 3.1, under the Local Government Act, Council can delegate to the members of Council staff holding, acting in or performing the position of the CEO, the powers, duties and functions set out in the schedule, and the schedule is attached to the report. This delegation was last presented to Council in October 2018, and as part of the current review, there's no changes required to this particular delegation. The report's presented to highlight that the review process is actually being conducted.
Thank you, Ms. Woolcock. Councillors, do you have any questions of Ms. Woolcock or the CEO regarding this item? There being none, we have a recommendation that the instrument of delegation from Council to the CEO be resolved. There's 6 points to the recommendation in the agenda. Do I have somebody who should move that motion? Councillor Beale, seconded. Councillor Allgood. Those in favour? Against? And carried. And I might just make a mention for those who are watching either live tonight or the broadcast from any time onwards from Wednesday morning, that Councillor Allgood is suffering a form of laryngitis that is becoming quite chronic, actually. So if there is a quieter presence at the meeting, then it's certainly explained for medical reasons, but we're very grateful that you can be here, Councillor Allgood, and we're going to rely on whispers and sign language to make sure that your participation is certainly noted. Thank you. So to get on to item 3.2, we continue with delegations from Council, this time to members of Council staff. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll pass it on to Ms. Woolcock.
Thank
you. Thanks for this one. Thank you.
Again, this is another delegation. This one is to members of council staff holding, acting in or performing the duties of officers or positions, the powers, duties, functions set out in the instrument. And again, the instrument is attached for information. Along with the review of staff delegations, this delegation included legislative changes to the Rail Safety Local Operations Act 2006 and Residential Tenancies Act 1997 and the Road Management Act 2014.
Very good, thanks Ms. Woolcock. Councillors, are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Braithwaite.
I'd just like to make the point that when reading these large lists of delegations, it's really hard to identify what's changed. If there is a change, and these are delegations we give to our CEO and to our staff to act on behalf of us. Yeah, I think I was on council in 2018, yeah, perhaps that was my first council meeting. I couldn't identify what's changed, so, wondering in the future, we might identify if something has changed by italics or a colour.
We can highlight that in colour next time. I think that's very straightforward.
Easy. That will make it easier to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beales, did you
No,
wish to?
just wanted to show
Thank
something
you.
to the CEO, that's fine.
Any further comments, councillors? We have a recommendation in 5 parts to accept this instrument, be signed and sealed. Do I have somebody to move? Thank you, Councillor Hull, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Beales. Councillors, those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 3.3, appointment and authorisations for the Planning and Environment Act 1987, Section 11A. Ms Wilcox, would you like to explain this item to us, please?
Item 3.3 is the appointment and authorisation of the Planning and Environment Act. There's a basic distinction between a delegation and an appointment. A delegate acts on behalf of the council, exercising the council's powers, where a person who is appointed to a position has the powers of that position. The changes to this appointment and authorisation follow a review of staff delegations. There was no legislative changes, it was just the appointment and authorised for the staff.
Thanks, Ms Wilcox.
Again, if I could, Madam Mayor, in future we'll just highlight that in colour where the changes have been made, whether there's a new officer appointed or there is legislative change or regulatory change driving the change delegation.
Thank
That'll
you.
make it clear for council.
Thanks, Mr CEO. Any questions, councillors? We have a recommendation in 3 parts. Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, and seconded. Thanks, Councillor Allgood. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Braithwaite?
No.
Anybody else wishing to speak to the motion? Thank you. Those in favour? Against? And that is carried. Item 3.4, an application for planning permit 02426. Mr CEO.
Yeah, this item, Madam Mayor, relates to a potential subdivision around 2 to 4 Taylor Street in Ararat, and I think that the plan there says it all. We've got a block of land there at 2 to 4 Taylor Street where access to the front of that via Taylor Street is actually impeded by some traffic calming works, and the proponent of the planning permit is asking if we could support an application to DELP to reopen the closed laneway at the rear of those premises to provide access to the potential development there. I think it's 17 metres of laneway that's requested to be opened again, and I'd certainly support that approach, given that the front access is very limited by that traffic calming work that we undertook some time ago.
About 20 metres as per the recommendation. Thank you. Yes, question, Councillor
Question for the
Beales.
CEO. But the laneway is open. If you walk, you can walk down it. It's just legally.
Sorry, my apologies. I think we requested for it to be closed some years ago, and DELP went through that process and closed it, and now we're requesting that to be reopened in a legal sense, not in a physical sense. Yeah.
But I've been down to look at it today, and it is closed off to the public. There's gates across both ends.
But the laneway.
Yeah.
I walked down it yesterday. It wasn't.
Gates across the public.
If I could, I mean, no one's purchased that land though, because generally, as you know, as you're aware, Councillor Braithwaite, often that land is offered to purchase to neighbouring landowners. It hasn't been purchased, it still sits there in DELP hands with the possibility of being reopened, and that is the only reasonable way we can actually provide access for development of that site.
Whoever owns this triangular piece here might want to purchase that at some later stage. It's only these last 2 houses that we're going to get access, isn't it? These last 2 blocks, 10 and...
It depends on the final configuration of that, Councillor Braithwaite.
Oh, is that going to be
It will be reconfigured. That's the current configuration there. The blocks currently been reconfigured under the planning application that we made. The final configuration hasn't been determined yet, but that traffic calming work on Taylor Street significantly impacts on access to that land and limits the use of the land as it currently stands, unless we support the application to reopen the laneway for review.
Any further questions of the CEO, councillors? We have a recommendation that council seek approval from the state government to reopen the laneway off Banksia Street for a distance of approximately 20 metres to provide practical access to the land at 2 to 4 Taylor Street on the basis that any costs associated with the reopening of the laneway be met by the land holder. Do I have somebody to move the motion? Councillor Beales, seconded Councillor Deutsch. Councillor Beales, do you wish to speak to the motion?
It makes perfect common sense.
Yep.
Councillor Deutsch?
Common sense.
Any further? Thank you. That being the case, we'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? Carried. Thank you. Item 3.5, the quarterly performance report. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This again is quite straightforward. I think we've already had a pretty fulsome conversation about this previously. The 4 notes on page 20 at the top of the page indicate that difference between projected surplus and the current projected deficit. That will be recovered once the Grants Commission money is paid forward to us. So that's a bit of an anomaly we face at this time of the year based on timing which government pays us grant money. We're running at a small surplus at this stage of about $111,000. And I think that we're in good shape at this point. If Council got any questions, I'd recommend the adoption of the motion.
Any questions, councillors? Do I have somebody to move the recommendation that the comprehensive income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flows and financial performance indicators for the period ended 31st December 2019 be received and adopted? Councillor Deutsch and seconded Councillor Allgood. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Deutsch?
I should say it's a very comprehensive report with full explanations on it. I read through it. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deutsch. Councillor Allgood? And any further comment? That being the case, we'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour and against, that's carried. Section 4, information reports, item 4.1, building approvals. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our building approvals information there is provided for your information. It's fairly straightforward in its content. If there are any questions around any of those items, I'm happy to answer them for you. But I think it's a fairly straightforward report.
No questions forthcoming, councillors? We have a recommendation that the building approvals report be received. Councillor, I'm not sure whether that was a scratch or a...
That was a scratch.
That was a scratch.
It can be a second.
I'll leave you to scratch. Councillor Braithwaite will say Councillor Hull, you moved that motion, and you seconded Councillor Deutsch. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Hull? Councillor Deutsch? No. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour and against? Carried. Thank you. Item 4.2, planning matters approved under delegation, planning permits and certification of subdivision plans. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, the information is there. It's quite straightforward. I will make one comment though. I saw some statistics provided by the Management Planning Community Compliance the other day around our performance in terms of on-time planning application approvals, and we are performing at around 90% on time, and the rest of the small rural average is at about 61%. So we're actually travelling extremely well in that space, and it's very good to see that we're doing that with the staffing model we have in place there. So it's excellent.
That's a tremendous...
Can I just mention there, once Greenlight gets into operation, will be even better.
Yeah.
I looked at it and just what this software can do is phenomenal.
Yep.
Excellent.
We should have used it 10 years ago.
We should have indeed. Thank you.
That's a great testimonial. Thanks, Councillor Deutsch. That is a very impressive statistic, isn't it? Any questions of the CEO regarding this report? Do I have somebody to move the recommendation that the report be received? Councillor Deutsch, seconded Councillor Beales. Do you wish to speak further to the motion, Councillor Deutsch?
It's a wonderful thing.
All praise for Greenlight on its way. Thank you. Councillor Beales, did you wish to speak? Yeah. I'll put that motion to the vote. Those in favour and against? Carried. Thank you. Item 4.3, Capital Works Program 2019-20. One of your favourite subjects, Mr.
It is one of my favourite subjects.
Very good reason.
It was very good. I had a phone call today from someone who's travelling from Geelong to Horsham, and they were very excited to be held up by roadwork almost all the way. And they were excited to have that happen actually, which was good, because their comment was that it's probably the same amount of roadwork they've seen in their shire they previously did in the last 10 years in that single journey. So that was really, really heartening. We are moving forward with our capital works projects. I think everything is operating pretty well on budget and on time at this point in time. I think that our engineering staff are working very, very well with contractors around the road construction. We're working with them. They're solving problems in the field, and it's travelling very well. And looking forward to getting on with stage 2 of the Warndoo-Streatham Road after this evening's meeting, because we're able to pay for that out of savings from this first section of Warndoo-Streatham Road. So that's a very exciting outcome for us.
That is a great win-win. Any questions for the CEO, councillors? No, we have had ample opportunity to study this report, as we had it prior to the agenda being released, so it was available to us at last week's briefing from that time on. So we have a recommendation that we receive the report. Somebody to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, and seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hull. Councillor Braithwaite, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, I'm very pleased with progress. I'm very pleased with the savings that's been made. Anybody reading our agenda today will see that we've got a massive program this year. And I'm very interested to see in March the result of the bridge kit workshop.
Yeah.
I think that that's got enormous potential for us in terms of our own bridge assets being replaced, and also possibly becoming an expert in that kit construction, where we can offer our expertise to other councils. So that's, to me, that's a really interesting thing. I wouldn't even mind going into it myself.
Yep. That'd be good. We'll see you in Brighton. That's good.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? And against? That's carried. Item 4.4, Community Support Grants Assessment Panel Report, December 2019. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is sort of the report plus a bit of commentary from me. So, we've had our first round of community grants, support grants under this model, which has been changed recently, as Council will be aware. There were community projects funded at $3,000 per project, and community events that were funded at around $5,000 per event, dealt with in the same funding round. It was interesting. There were 3 community members who came together to adjudicate the findings from those grants, and it was a very good experience. I sat there as an observer, just directing traffic around the grants, which is very good, and it was really good to get that feedback from community members in that space. Certainly much better than council officers making that selection, I've got to say. Learned a lot more about how community groups were functioning, how they were finding the process. I've had a lot of feedback from across the municipality about the process itself. And I guess I've described as cumbersome and represents a significant burden on volunteer-based community organisations. I think there's a need for us to actually simplify that grant application process. There's also a need for us to include some small component of infrastructure capacity there for community groups who want to actually build or do something of that nature. And my proposal is that I come back to the next council meeting with the review of that community grant application process and a more streamlined approach to that. If council is prepared to do that, that would be excellent.
Very good. Thanks for that very frank and honest insight to the process. There's nothing quite like user feedback, is there? Any questions of the CEO? No? Councillors, we have a recommendation in 2 parts that we receive the panel report and that a report be presented to the March 2020 council meeting reviewing the current community grant application and funding process and the current council sponsorship regime. Moved by Councillor Allgood, seconded Councillor Deutsch. Do you wish to...
I do. I'm going to try.
Okay.
I want you to say it's really great that there were so many happy people there. It is a big job to actually put in for these grants. It is really worthwhile, but I think that it doesn't matter how you do it, it's always going to need some tweaking. So it's good that we've recognised that, but lovely to be there with so many happy faces.
We're happy faces for sure. Yes, Councillor Beers?
I do wish to speak. I'm pleased that this council made the decision to take the vetting of these projects out of the councillors' hands, and in the federal parliament we can see what happens when that happens, and I'm sure it's happened here in the past. It's really good that the community members are involved and they're high quality. It's obvious that there are some there that have received money in the past, but they're being weaned back. It's not a right to expect money every year from the council grants fund. So, but it does need tweaking, and the simplification is really a good idea. That's where we'll have our input into the processes, not the actual decisions. So I'm pleased the way we're heading anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Beales. Any further comment? So that motion was moved by Councillor Allgood, and I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Against? No, carried. Thank you. Moving on to section 5, committee minutes and reports, beginning with item 5.1, section 86, committees of management minutes. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll pass that strong to Ms. Woolcock to report to council.
This report outlines all the minutes that we've received since the last December council meeting. There's 8, I think, that haven't actually provided minutes, and they've all been contacted, so hopefully we'll have a few more at the March meeting.
Thank you for providing that detail, Ms. Woolcock. Any questions, councillors? We have a recommendation in 12 parts that minutes be accepted, and also the nominated candidates to committees of management for a couple of those organisations are detailed in that recommendation. Do I have somebody to move the motion? Councillor Beales, and a seconder? Councillor Hull. Councillor Beales, do you wish to speak?
No.
Councillor Allgood?
Yes, I attended the Wycliffe meeting, and there is some real issues down there about phone reception, and they're trying to work through it, and I know that the CEO was actually trying to look at it as well, but it's getting to be absolutely critical, and they're really stressed and upset about it, and I think it's something we should follow up wholly and solely, because it's a real issue and it's a real problem.
Yes, Councillor Allgood, the CEO and I have been discussing this very issue because it's an increasing problem right across our municipality. Wycliffe is symptomatic of lots of areas that are really struggling with decent telecommunication. So we are following up on that, and we look forward to being able to report back to council. Are there any other comments wishing to be made regarding the recommendation? That being the case, we'll put the motion. Those in favour? And against? And that's carried. Section 6, Assembly of Councillors. We had 2 briefings, 4th and 11th of February. We have a recommendation that the reports be received, but firstly, are there any questions of Ms. Woolcock regarding this report? We have none. So do we have somebody to move the motion? Councillor Braithwaite, seconded Councillor Beales. And do you wish to speak on the motion? No? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And against? That is carried. Section 7, Councillor Reports. This is the opportunity for councillors to provide an overview of any meetings that have been attended. Commencing with you, Councillor Allgood.
I think we've had a quiet time over Christmas. Most of the work that I've actually done has been of a personal nature.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deutsch. Councillor Hull.
I'd like to report on the J Ward AGM, which I went to in the last week, and I was absolutely blown away by the way that organisation works. And I'll just give you a few statistics that I gathered from that meeting. They had an amazing year. They set new attendance records, just under 16,000 visits between J Ward and Ararat. They won the Armada Award for a volunteer-run museums against some prestigious competition, which was not just local or Victoria, but from quite prestigious museums, and I think that was quite a feather in their cap. They didn't win a place in the Ararat Rural City Business Awards, but they did win a category in the State Business Awards. So So we're assuming that maybe there was different categories of criteria. The gross turnover for the year was just under $250,000, and they returned an outstanding 9.1% annual profit. Now, I think there'd be quite a few businesses in town who would be very happy to have a similar turnover. It's a volunteer organisation. Their members work cooperatively with each other. They fill a wide variety of roles as cashiers, record keepers, gardeners, caterers. They've had 2 weddings last year and more lined up this year. And the gardens in Jaywood are absolutely picture perfect. They were just beautiful. I think we should congratulate them for running a very successful tourism venture, 7 days a week. They bring visitors into Ararat from all over Australia, and those visitors patronise cafes and accommodation and our retail business. They are a very important input to our local economy, and I think they should be congratulated for the work that they do.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Hull. Councillor Braithwaite.
Just a couple of things. I attended the Pomona Hall meeting a week or so ago, and just to report that the upcoming Small Halls Festival will be held on Wednesday the 11th of March, beginning at 6 o'clock. It's it's grown in the last 2 years, and I'm sure it will grow again this year. It's a great little function to go to, and it starts at 6 and ends at about 10 o'clock, and the whole community get involved. The other thing that I attended yesterday was the Lake Fines Committee, which are working through a number of very difficult issues with the current lessee, let's say.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Beales.
I've got to test my memory here, but I think the 13th of December was a Friday. So Friday the 13th, I attended on behalf of the Mayor the 40th anniversary of Ararat North Primary School, and the Mayor and I had been there the day before for a cheque presentation for scholarships, and we both bought their cookbook.
We did.
And to see the smiling faces of students on the pages is absolutely fascinating. It was, you know, you've got these young kids with their recipes and they're looking at you every time you open the book. I haven't used it yet, but then you see I haven't been doing much cooking recently with a young fella in the house who just wants to eat healthy food. It's not crumpy cakes. The 18th to 12th was a World Migrant Luncheon, which I attended and enjoyed that. Not as many people as I thought, but there was quite a few different nationalities represented, so it was good. And of course, 26th of January was Australia Day, and I enjoyed going to that, the naturalisation ceremony, which is of course a highlight of any year for any councillor, let alone for a mayor. So I'm sure you did enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beales. And it has been a while since we last met on the 10th of December, and I've had the privilege to attend many and varied opportunities to connect with the community. Along with Councillor Beales and Councillor Braithwaite at various campuses, we had the opportunity to award the Ararat Rural City scholarships to primary and secondary schools, and that kept me traversing back and forth across the municipality. It was also a great opportunity to check out our capital works improvements. Along with the CEO, I got to check out the efficacy of the air conditioning at the Ararat Fitness Centre when we attended the futsal grand final matches on a very, very warm, stuffy evening. And the system kept up. It was amazing.
Was there any biff at that meeting?
Beg pardon?
Any biff?
Not any matches that I witnessed. No, they were very well conducted. The Christmas celebrations were a joy to attend, with carols by candlelight in the Alexandra Gardens here in town and community Christmas parties at Tadyoon and also Buanga. Australia Day was marked with a gathering at the Alexandra Oval in Ararat, honouring Peter Carthew OAM posthumously for his extraordinary ambassadorship over many years, and also the Ararat Fire Brigade and Ararat Neighbourhood House received Australia Day awards from our council. As you've mentioned, Councillor Beales, conferring citizenship to Tutka was an absolute pleasure. And next time I will know to watch the Ararat City Band conducted more closely to ensure that we come in with the national anthem from the top. There wasn't an introduction, we were bombed straight into it, so that was a trap for young players. The band played really well, the music was super. Just a couple of weeks later, we had our community grants being presented, over $27,000 as reported in tonight's agenda. And the Grampians Ride to Remember event struck some of the best weather we've had so far this year. There were over 300 participants who thoroughly enjoyed the camaraderie of the annual event, and the route was greatly appreciated, really picturesque roads. That was, of course, for the East Grampians Health Service fundraiser for the Blue Ribbon Foundation. I helped cut the ribbon at Gorse Rural's new Lake Bowl fertiliser plant that'll be delivering customised blending for precision ag, and last week we celebrated the visit of the welcome scroll to our municipality, reaffirming our firm position as a community that welcomes refugees and respects multicultural diversity and migrants of our region. In local government land, I've met with South West Council mayors and the Western Highway Action Committee, and I'm honoured to have been chosen as one of 15 mayors across Victoria who've been appointed to the Minister's Local Government Mayoral Advisory Panel, and we have our first meeting coming up next week. So we have a recommendation that councillor reports be received. Do I have somebody? Councillor Beale, seconded Councillor Hull, and we don't think we need to speak to that motion. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour and against, that's carried. Section 8, no notices of motion were received, so we shall move on to Section 9, no urgent business has been received. So we'll walk along to Section 10, which is the closed session, the confidential part of our meeting this evening. And the following agenda items are listed for consideration in the confidential session: a contract, a sale of land and supply of electricity. We have a recommendation that the open council meeting will now be... Oh, sorry, Councillor Beale?
I'm moving the recommendation.
Right, I thought you had a question. We have a recommendation that the open council meeting will now be closed, but members of the public are welcome to rejoin the council meeting following the recommencement of the meeting. The recommendation, as it stands, we have Councillor Beales, who's very keen to move it, and seconder, Councillor Howell, you can't speak to Councillor Braithwaite. Those in favour and against, that's carried. Thank you.